My name's Maxine Jones, and I was an early activist with the union, and eventually became a co-leader with. We had a wonderful union leader here. His name was Bob Price, and I eventually became a co-leader with him, and went on to represent the faculty provincially. But it all started with the Voights. Ours was Voight, but there are 3 or 4 institutes of technology in Ontario. They became the nucleus for the community colleges. They were heavily technology and sciences, and so they started talking union, and a couple of them took summers off and traveled around the province and talked to the rest of us who didn't have anybody there representing our interests. So we unionized. I think we certified in '72. It wasn't long after the program I was with had been absorbed by the union. I think we certified in '72. I know we were 72 or '73 because in '75 there was legislative change about how our union would operate. So I know we were well organized by then. And but they were dominated by the math and science teachers.
Purposes to talk about the history and development of Local 138.
Okay, 138 was, again, we had a Voight here, Western Ontario Institute of Technology, and their teachers were the nucleus. When we actually went to vote, we had a choice of freestanding, it had another name, but we would have become a local in our own right. Affiliating with the secondary school teachers and joining, geez, I can hardly remember what it was called. It was a company union that had the provincial government employees in it. Pat, what was it called?
I just remember CSIO.
Because we became OPSEU eventually, but we were
CSIO, Civil Service Association
Civil Service
of Ontario.
Association of Ontario, which was essentially a company union. To give you an example, when the president retired from CSAO, they always got a cushy job in the public service. The first president who didn't was the guy who led us into the Ontario Public Service Employees Union. His name was Charlie Darrow. He was from our area, Woodstock, but that was our area. And he went back into the bargaining unit, and that was a singular event in the history of the unionization of the colleges. So we had 2 sort of highly recognized leaders. Both of them in technology. One of them was Bill King. I got that right?
Fred Beaton.
Dick King.
And Dick King, sorry.
Dick King.
And I don't recall Fred Beaton being active, but I'm sure he was. There was a group of them. They're all from that technology section. They led the whole thing. And we then had a province-wide vote. 2 colleges stayed out, Sheridan and Seneca stayed out. I might have that wrong, but 2 of them did not join CSAO. The rest of us affiliated with it, and they gave us a bargaining unit within their structure. We were the first province-wide bargaining unit in the union. And that's because they didn't understand us, they didn't understand our legislation, didn't understand anything about us. And we went on to lead the union, I will tell you. We made a huge impact on it. I referred earlier to the existing president. He led this reorganization of CSAO, and he was defeated by a community college teacher. And Sean O'Flynn became the president of the whole union. So we had a huge impact on the bigger union. You remember any of that, Sandi?
No, that was a little bit early for me. I'm Sandi Webster.
Yeah.
I didn't become involved in the union immediately. Then I met Maxine and Bob, and sort of my fate was sealed. I got involved with the union through Maxine and Bob, and it progressed to more involvement over the years, first serving on the executive here, and then onto the bargaining team, president of the local. A lot of interesting years, and we really, when I met with people in Toronto, I found the same thing Maxine found, is that we were doing things right here. We had an issue, it got resolved, and that was it. Where other colleges had these ongoing battles for years over things that we resolved over a beer at the Sandhill with with the president.
For example, if we had 100 grievances in the system, 50 of them came from Fanshawe College.
Yeah.
They had 50% of the grievances in the system, and we wouldn't have any. We rarely did things leave the college and go to grievance, which we saw as a huge success. That meant they got resolved internally, and it was a resolution that fit our circumstances. So I discovered when I became active provincially that we were light years ahead of many of the colleges. Again, I gave Q a lot of that credit, but there's something in the water in Windsor too. There's something, there's a union element in the water. We're more accustomed to acting collectively down here, and we did.
Well, I think at Fanshawe, for example, and probably Seneca is the same. I think they measure the strength of the union by the number of grievances that you file, not by the outcome of issues. And so they would file all kinds of grievances, which in the end run, I mean, those grievances would be lost, so it would hurt other people because the issue had actually been raised provincially, instead of letting a silly issue just fall aside.
And OPSEU, previously CSAO, had this stupid policy that no member's grievance could be refused. The union did not have carriage rights for grievances. No. And so some fool could file a stupid, harmful grievance, and they had every right, and the union had to carry it. The labor law said the union had to carry that grievance. They did us a lot of damage until we started getting our act together and pressuring the withdrawal of some of these harmful. You never could pressure Fanshawe. They had a stupid grievance. It went right to the top where it got lost, and we all suffered.
Locally, staff and adult retraining took over the leadership of Local 138.
Essentially, we did because most of us had had some real world experience. Most of the other teachers came out of the secondary school system or professional associations of some kind. And we had all had experience. I was a newspaper reporter. I covered strikes and stuff like that. I knew these weren't evil people who were out there on the picket line. And a lot of our teachers had industrial experience. And we were a highly unionized city. So we just carried all that. It was sort of in our mother's milk.
I remember you as president did something unprecedented when you organized a walkout of the faculty in support of the president of the college.
Oh, I thought you said U.S. president. I thought, which one would that be?
US.
Yes, the Board of Governors fired our president, and he decided to fight it. And I will be faithful to the memory of Joe Menzel for the rest of my days. Joe was the dean of retraining, and he fought it with Dr. Q. And Q immediately brought in the union. He said, this is what's happened. I'm fighting it. You can decide what you want to do. And what we decided to do was to walk out in support of him. That was unheard of in the province. And we shut the college down, the two locals. There was strong support staff leadership then too. And the two locals walked out, except for a handful of people, and shut the union down. And that was, when I next went to Toronto, they couldn't believe we had done that. They couldn't figure out why we had done it. Now that's a perfect example of their not having understanding of the power of collective action. They couldn't see that was a great accomplishment. They saw it as a funny thing to do. But anyhow, we shut it down. Now Q eventually got the settlement he wanted, and he left happily. We weren't happy about it. I was on the search committee to find a replacement, which was a new experience for me. And one of the things I learned is that nobody wanted to come to Windsor. That was quite a shock to me. We had a couple of people we were perfectly happy to offer the presidency to, and they wouldn't come to Windsor. So we started down a path of not being the location.
The sought-after
candidates wanted to
Yeah.
relocate. Big exception was Bert Martin. He was a sailor and he just loved being here. He loved the sailing environment. He'd have lived here happily the rest of his life. But his wife couldn't get a job teaching. It was hard times in the post-secondary, in the elementary and secondary hiring field. And his wife couldn't get a job teaching. She never liked it here. But basically, we've always had trouble attracting high-quality candidates. I don't mind saying that. It was my experience. I served on 2 committees. Saw it happen.
You were very active in 1984 during the first province-wide community college strike.
It wasn't the first. The support staff struck before we did. That was the first college-wide strike in the system, and that was fairly early in our certification. I think it might have been 72 or 73. It was fairly early. The support staff certified before we did. It's one of the reasons we went to OPSEU. The support staff had certified with them, and they struck before we did. We had the first faculty strike, and frankly, we were the what's it called when you're the mandatory service? You don't have a college if you don't have teachers. We were the necessary service, and when we struck, the colleges basically shut down. So we struck twice while I was here and once after I retired.
Yeah.
My recollection is that there was a lot of money in the college system initially, and then gradually they started taking that.
Oh,
Oh,
yes,
and
there was money to burn
There was so much
under
frustration
Q's presidency.
and anger
Yeah.
that strike just had to happen.
Oh, yes. And, my memories of it aren't that vivid. I always enjoyed it. I thought it was wonderful. The picket line is a wonderful place to be. And I understood that because I was active with the New Democratic Party, and we were always showing up at picket lines in industry. And I couldn't get over how happy people were to be on strike, and what a great spirit the strikers had. So I was really pleased when we struck, and we had the same attitude.
Well, what I noticed, the changing relationship between post-secondary and retraining. There were a lot of people did picket duty together. When you're walking that line with people in the cold, usually it was in the cold.
We always picked the cold.
And they got to know each other. So you saw people actually finding out that, that retraining person's not that bad, or that post-secondary person's not that snobby, and it developed some really good friendships.
Yes, there wasn't an awful lot of integration before the unionization.
No.
There was, in fact, separate parts of the college. But unionization brought it all to a head. We had a couple of critical votes, and when every faculty member showed up to get the information, and then voted, and we had a strong strike vote when that first strike occurred.
We always did get a strong
Yeah,
strike
we always
vote.
got
We
a
always
strong
got a
strike vote.
very good
Some of them didn't
strike
get strike
vote.
votes. They went on strike anyhow because we were one bargaining
Yeah.
unit. But some of them didn't even get a strike vote. And they had to go on strike.
Well,
Imagine how happy they were.
I think part of the reason we always got strong support here, though, for our votes is we've always been a no-nonsense kind of local. Like, we're going to tell you like it is.
Yes.
And we're not gonna
No
we're
fairy
not gonna
tale.
say what some other local presidents will say just to get a strike vote, and then people find out, well, that's not what I went out on strike for,
And it's sort of sad
Yeah.
that the one person that we give most of the credit to, Bob Price, is among the many people who have died. And Bob was a very dynamic leader, very strong leader. Didn't spend 1 second polishing his reputation or trying to charm anybody. He was all business, and if you didn't want to talk business where he wanted you to talk business, you didn't talk business. And he was no bullshit. He was just straightforward, and we were very fortunate to have him. Other colleges had to tippy-toe around issues where he just told it what it was. He said, you can do that, but here's what the outcome will be. He was very clear and very strong and very straightforward and very clever, very, very clever man. So he should be here telling the story.
And he had
but-
the cojones to back it up.
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
He was fearless. He was fearless.
You talked a lot about how collegial your relationship was with Dr. Q. What were your recollections recollections of Bruce McCall?
Oh,
and George
I can.
Martin back in-
I'll do Bruce. Since you hired Bruce,
I
I'll talk
kept-
about
I
him.
kept Bruce on the short list, so I'm responsible for his coming here.
We went-
But I liked him.
We went from someone, I mean, as just a normal staff member here, not involved with the union, we went from someone where a president, his door was always open, he had phones all over the
Red
college,
phones.
the red phones, and you could pick up that phone, this is Q I'm talking about, you pick up that phone and it rang directly in his office and he'd talk to you. That's the kind of dynamic man he was. I went to him once, I had an idea for doing a clown troupe to get us out in the community, and he gave me some money to make clown costumes. I mean, go for it, it's a good idea. So we went from that, with all the open doors, to closed doors, and
To
a very
Bell Canada.
and a very tall man. Like, you know, Q was a slight man, and then there's this very tall, big man, closed doors. I mean, you didn't ever see him, ever, roaming the
He had a lot of learning
halls.
to do.
I think he was afraid.
He had a
I
sharp
think he
learning
was-
curve.
I don't know.
He came from Bell Canada in Quebec.
Yeah.
And he was part of the wave of migrants who were leaving Quebec because it was getting to be too separatist.
Yeah.
So that doesn't say, you know, that says something about him, about how inflexible, in fact, he started out to be. But he came good. He did come good. I remember him fondly as president.
It was approachable.
He was approachable. He was a nice person, too.
He was just afraid.
He was afraid of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people were afraid of him.
Imagine him being afraid of Bob.
Bert Martin?
Well, I think he had great potential.
I do, too. Bert would have been okay.
Yeah, part of his problem was, like Max said, he loved the area, you know, and his wife really enjoyed the area, but Bert was involved in so much in Toronto that he wasn't here a lot. He was always away. One of my favorite Bert Martin stories, he used to hate the fact that faculty could do their marking at home, that we didn't have to sit in our office and mark our papers. We could take it home.
He came from St. Lawrence College, by the way.
That drove him crazy.
Not a bastion of unionism.
That drove him crazy. And every time we'd get into it about it, oh, no, it's not right. You should be doing it here. Then I ran into him after he'd left the college. I think when Niagara on the Lake or something, I ran into him. I said, how's it going? And he said, it's great. I'm not sure who he was working for in Toronto. One of the...
It's Triple C, I
Was
think.
it Triple?
Yeah.
Okay. And I said, how's it going? He said, it's great. I don't have to go to the office every day. I can work from home. And I said, really? It is nice, isn't it?
See, that's why Q was so invaluable. He didn't come out of the educational system. So he didn't have any preformed ideas about how teachers are supposed to behave and perform.
Levants and Levant.
Yes, he came from a beer manufacturer, yeah.
Levants.
So he didn't come with all of those. McCausland had a very rigid idea of how teachers were to behave, and Bert Martin came from St. Lawrence, where rigidity was the name of the game.
Sandi, were you president of Local 138 when Jack McGee was president?
Yes.
How would you characterize that relationship?
Jack had a lot of problems.
He never really got the feel for the college
Yeah.
system. He came from George Brown, but he was there a very short
A
time.
nice man. I really liked Jack McGee as a person, like a great guy. He had a lot of problems understanding faculty, I think, for lack of a better word. He
His
just...
claim to fame is that he piloted the plane the Queen traveled in. I mean, that tells you a lot. He thought that was a significant entry in his curriculum vitae.
But he did, before he left, Jack and I went for lunch before he left, and we had a good talk. And at that point, like, he finally got it. He finally got the problems, like, be nice, be open, be supportive,
Human.
not, you know, he finally got it. He's gone on to go out west with criminal justice. Yeah.
He had a
Again,
military background.
yeah, nice man,
Doesn't
but I
work
think
here.
he was just,
Well, he was a top-down kind of.
Yeah,
yeah. All hierarchy,
yeah.
whereas we were telling what to do at the
We
bottom.
were bottom up, that's right.
We were bottom up.
Talk a lot about, the training staff being so significant in union leadership.
Oh, they were solidly
But there was
unionist.
one blip, if I remember it, when Charlie Wilson became president of Health Lansford. was his,
Well,
chief steward.
post-secondary felt a little left out by, not only by our style, but by the decision-making apparatus. They were represented, of course, but they were outvoted. And there's always a rump group that wanted to take over the union. They just didn't have the numbers to do it. And then they fooled us once, and they did it. And it was a nightmare, literally a
Short-lived,
nightmare.
too.
Short-lived.
Well, what I remember about that was when I'm not using it, when Bob was not the president, there were layoff notices were given out to staff, and
They never really
There was-
understood the layoff system.
there was nobody there. I mean, whenever layoff notices were given out and we were involved, we met with the people and we said, okay, this is what we're going to do. And we were there to counsel and to hug if we had to, or meet with them or whatever, go for a beer, whatever what they needed. There was no one around. No one in the executive was around. They just didn't know what to do. And I think that was sort of a signal to other people like, well,
Yeah.
we're not voting that way again. And Bob became president again.
Yeah, but I remember Bob, the first time we had layoffs, I remember Bob crying. Anybody else remember that? He was just so hurt that
Yeah.
somebody had to go on some occasion. And I had to bump, which, and I'd have lots of seniority and lots of education, and I had to bump one of the princesses, and everybody was just thunderstruck that could happen.
When you left the presidency of Local 13 at Maxine, you went on to do a number of things.
I was getting
at the
old.
provincial level.
Yes, yeah, and I was getting old. Yeah, I operated at the provincial level for 15 years as a member of the executive board, sometimes vice president. I loved it. I loved the union activity. I learned more as a unionist than I ever learned as a student, I'm here to tell you. But it really grinds you down. It's very hard on you, hard on your family life, hard on everything. So I decided for a variety of reasons, I retired. Otherwise, I'd still be active in it.
I remember when I was president of the local, Phil Cunnington called me and asked if I'd be willing to run for the bargaining team. I don't know. And I talked to Maxine. I said, okay, like, what kind of a commitment is this? Am I going to be able to do it? That sort of thing. I was nervous. Like, should I do it? And, oh, it's 3 months, 4 months maybe, 5 max. I ran for the team. I got elected. And that was the year that we decided to challenge some of the social contract issues. It was 3 years. I was on that bargaining team for 3 years. Thank you.
Yeah,
And I was
very interesting years.
well, it was. We were in court a lot. I got to see the bullet holes in the courthouse in Toronto where someone shot somebody, and I went on to be on 3 more teams after that.
Any distinct memories about the 1989 faculty strike?
Well, I did what they always do in the industrial unions. I went to Toronto and got a job as a bilingual file clerk, as if the addresses are spelled, as if the names and addresses would be different by being bilingual. I always thought that was hilarious. That's a traditional thing to do in the industrial sector, so that you're not a drain on the union's money. And I did that, so I didn't do picket duty or anything in the second one. I loved it in the first one.
I remember during that strike, it was getting to the point of ridiculous, though. Like, bargaining wasn't happening. And again, our local was very strong provincially. And it was felt that the bargaining team of the day, I was not on that team, the bargaining team of the day was not doing the work that they should be doing, and was holding people out on strike for reasons that weren't those reasons they voted to go on strike for in the first place. And Bob was annoyed, and you don't get Bob annoyed. I remember that we had this stewards meeting, and we went around and around and around the table trying to figure out how to word this message we were going to send to the bargaining team, right? And I think there were quite a few interesting words in there, along with, if you don't get your stuff together, we're going to go back in. I mean, this is ridiculous. You're holding us out for issues that we didn't agree to go out on strike. And that's how powerful our local was, because they immediately went back to doing what they were supposed to do when the strike was settled.
Yeah, what happens in these situations is that some people start making a career out of it.
Yeah.
And frankly, they're trying to stay out of the classroom, is my judgment. And you were out of the classroom if you're on a bargaining team. Not my first bargaining team, but eventually they took you out of the classroom if you're on a bargaining team. And frankly, I think an awful lot of people enjoyed it more than being in the classroom. And so they extended it. It was some very arbitrary moves, nothing to do with any principles that were involved.
But-
It's very hard to have a province-wide bargaining unit. When you think of the different values ranging from Thunder Bay to St. Lawrence to Windsor, I mean, we're the size of a country.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible to whip them into a collective.
Yeah, because the issues of up
Yeah,
north
the
aren't the
issues are
same
so
as the
different.
issues
If we
down
had
here.
local
But
bargaining here, we probably never would have been on strike, right?
no,
Well, no, probably not, because we were always able to get to a settlement. Our idea was always to get to a settlement.
yeah.
Others wanted to get to a strike, and others wanted to never get to a settlement. So, it was hard to. There's some people for whom perfection is the ideal.
I know we have fewer grievances than any other college in the system, but I don't see how we can talk about Local 138 without talking about Bill Stamler as chief steward. Didn't he?
Oh, yes, he was great, a great chief steward.
Very good
yeah,
chief steward.
Excellent. You didn't have anybody better defending you than Bill. He had a very different low-key style, knew everybody, was friendly.
Did his
Yeah.
homework.
Did his
Oh,
homework,
yes.
absolutely significant. No winging it. He knew what he was talking about when he went in front of you. No, Bill was excellent. He of course was trained by Bob. Bob Price trained him.
And you trained Bob.
Well, I don't think Bob saw it that way.
I'm not sure Bob was
Yeah, I
trainable,
don't
but
think
she.
he was trainable either.
I think she could have nudged him a lot,
Yeah,
though.
I might have helped him see some light at the end of the tunnel every once in a while, but no, wouldn't say I trained Bob.
But it was just our mindset here as a local was so different from the rest of the
One of the things,
province.
one of the points we're making is how important personalities were.
Yeah.
Personalities were very significant in the union business. We were just lucky to have Bob and Bill in our local. And there were colleges that didn't have anybody like them. Anybody tough, anybody clearly spoken. There were a lot of people who were just fiddling around and they had airy-fairy ideas about what unions were supposed to do. We were blessed by being from Windsor, really.
Yeah.
After a lot of us retired, Sandy Webster stayed on as president of Local 138. What were some of your recollections of your presidential years?
Well, I remember how much I missed Maxine and Bob and all the rest of you who chose to retire and leave me here. But I tried to follow the way Bob did. Like, let's resolve the issue. We had some frivolous types of grievances that didn't make it out of the college because people, this is crazy.
People have bête noirs they always
Yeah,
want to be
yeah.
throwing lances at.
It was interesting. We had a strike. I was on the bargaining team at the time. I learned that what you say to the newspaper reporter is not what the newspaper reporter writes. I've learned that snippets, when you're being interviewed, are not necessarily put together the way you said them. That was a learning experience.
Another thing very important here, which we would be remiss if we didn't mention, the relationship between the support staff union and the faculty was very good.
Yeah.
There were colleges where they didn't talk to each other.
Yeah.
So that's an example of what was different about being in Windsor. And it was very significant. They gave us a lot of support, both our strikes, we gave them a lot of support. It was very significant stuff. And we met with them often, too.
It was, I noticed though, it's hard, at least I found it difficult trying to build up the union after the union types who'd been here for so long left, because it's a different, well, that's you. It's a different type of faculty member now. They're not quite as strong union. It's hard developing those skills in a person.
Well, they take for granted
Yeah.
the things that we fought so
Yeah.
hard to get.
Yeah.
That's a maturing of a bargaining unit. That happens everywhere, I think.
But when you leave, you worry. It's your baby you're leaving.
Yeah.
You know, you worry about what's happening, and I have no idea. Been gone 5 years, don't know.
We've both observed that there's very little media coverage of the union activities. Now, that might be because there's very little media left in Windsor. But we used to think that the public's right to know was up there with our membership. And we often reached our membership through the media. There's none of that happening now.
Yeah.
So, we had good relationships with the local industrial unions too. That's another point.
Well, and one of the, going back to talking about retraining, one of the presidents of one of the locals here that gave us support had been a student of ours
Yeah.
in upgrading,
A
and
lot
he
of
went
them-
through, yeah.
A lot of the
Yeah.
union activists had been to our,
Yeah,
had been into the college for one reason or
Yeah.
another.
That'd be a Nick Zeus,
that would be. Lives around the corner from me, actually, and I see him quite often, yeah. So it's
Well,
good to see when people are successful. He's retired too.
A lot of positive memories. He built something strong.
Yes,
Oh,
but
yeah.
it's faded. But that's the maturing of the bargaining unit again. And everybody's getting old too. We are now a mature bargaining unit. After all, we've been unionized 72, and
Yeah.
we're 150, or 2015, whatever that is. You're the math teacher.
A lot of the kinks in the contracts have been worked out. I mean,
So
that's
we're over
what,
50 years.
yeah.
That takes care of a lot of them.
Yeah.
Okay,